10 moments from my previous 19 shows. Listen in, text in, and call in to share your thoughts on the show. Tune in, talk it out live on Podbean. This is Teachers Talk Radio.
Live from Nottingham, this is the Saturday Lunch with Tom Hopkins Burke on Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live on the Podbean app or desktop player. Just head over to www.podbean.com/LSW/TT Radio or search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TT Radio.
We are live and we are ready to go. Welcome to the Saturday Lunch on Teachers Talk Radio. My name is Tom Hopkins Burke, and today is Saturday, the 21st of August. That's 4 days until my birthday and 10 days until I return to work. Last week's show, I did a bit of number crunching for GCSE and A-level results and pondered what the 2022 cohort could face in terms of their exams and their grades. I also rambled on about workplace romance. Is it really worth a hassle? How do you handle the dynamics of the rest of the staff room if you're dating a colleague? And how do you respond if it all goes wrong? Today, there is a very different show. It is my 20th show. Have I mentioned that already this afternoon? It's my 12th Saturday Lunch show, and I also hosted 8 news hours in the early days of Teachers Talk Radio. I'm one of the first people to be involved when I joined Teachers Talk Radio. There were 4 hosts, and I think not next week, but the week after, we'll be having our 500th show. So to mark the occasion of my 20th show, I've looked through my previous 19 shows to find my top 10 moments in the Saturday afternoon slot. So over the course of today's show, you will be hearing from, in no particular order, Joe Marucci, Kelly Seeley, Jasmine Selwood, Farhan Shah, Bridget Griffin, Ben Newmark, Sean Webster MBE, Adam Smith, Susanna Strong, Nikki McGee, Ali Daubney, James Manwaring, Dr. Liz Stafford, Don Gilthorpe, Gawain Little, Carly Waterman, and Dina Mandel. And I'll be counting down from 10 to 1 my top 10 moments. If you are listening live like Joey's and you are in the top 10, you can call in afterwards and let me know how you found it on Teachers Talk Radio and your thoughts on the part of that interview I played. If you are listening live on Podbean, of course, text in, call in to make your voice heard by clicking on one of the call-in icons. I will bring you in after the end of each interview. Of course, the interview is not live because they're from one of my previous 19 shows. If you're listening on our stream via Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, then a very good afternoon to you. If you're listening back on demand via our website, ttradio.org/listen back, via Podbean, via Spotify, or via Apple Podcasts, then a warm welcome to you today. But if you want to interact directly with me, download the Podbean app, subscribe to Teachers Talk Radio, get calling in and texting in. Please also tweet us at TT Radio 2021 with the hashtag TT Radio with your thoughts on the show, whether you're listening live or listening back. Of course, we have a new delivery of Teachers Talk Radio mugs, notepads, pens, and badges, thanks to our wonderful sponsors. So if you call in at any point in the show today, you have a chance to win yourself a Teachers Talk Radio mug. So don't be shy. Call in to offer your thoughts on my top 10 countdown. But I'm just going to keep you waiting a little bit longer. I'm going to play the weekend news from Joe Fox. Some really interesting stories around COVID here. So take a listen, text in with your thoughts.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
A UK university has become the first in the country to make COVID vaccination mandatory for students, according to a report in The Telegraph. Hartpury University and College in Gloucester released a statement on its website stating that COVID-19 measures for the coming academic year included the expectation that all eligible students will engage and take up vaccinations as soon as they are given the opportunity. The statement later goes on to say that it is a mandatory requirement that all eligible students in on-site residential accommodation will engage in the COVID-19 vaccination programme and have both doses. The statement further points out the likelihood that students without proof of vaccination will be limited in terms of access to social events and venues on the campus. Although the statement says that this is in line with the national picture, where vaccinations proof may be required for all adults wishing to access entertainment or hospitality venues. The statement, however, does also make it clear that the requirement does not apply to students who cannot have the vaccine due to medical exemptions. As schools and colleges across England and Wales begin preparation for the return of pupils, students in the Channel Island of Guernsey have learned that they must have a COVID test before returning in September. According to ITV Channel Island News, the tests have been introduced by Public Health to try and reduce the spread of the virus in schools. Pupils, teachers and school staff will be supplied with packs of lateral flow tests, and these will be dispatched to home addresses from Monday the 23rd of August. Anyone returning to schools is asked to complete 2 tests, one no later than the day before they go back. The report also suggests that while States of Guernsey is expecting some COVID cases in schools, it is trying to keep numbers low through testing. Away from the pandemic, Further Education Week is reporting on the DfE decision to refuse a petition calling for it to back down from defunding BTECs. The petition itself was started by the Sixth Form Colleges Association. In an official response, the DfE says it is streamlining and improving the quality of post-16 qualifications. It goes on to say that some BTECs may qualify for funding in the future, provided they meet new criteria. The DfE is looking to introduce a twin-track system where most pupils will pursue either A-levels or T-levels. In the response, the DfE focused on the need for students to enter the workforce well equipped to progress to further training or to get a skilled job, particularly as the country recovers from the economic impact of the pandemic. Critics of the proposals insist that the changes limit student choice and will have a negative impact on many. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio Weekend News.
Thank you to Joe Foxman News. That last story really interesting, something I really want to cover in a future show about the demise of a BTEC and the rise of a T-level and what vocational qualifications are best suited to students over the age of 16. On to the countdown. Let's start with number 10. My guests at number 10 are embarking on their first year as qualified teachers from this September. So I'm sure that, like me, you will wish them well for their ECT years. It's time to hear from Farhan Shah, Jasmine Selwood and Bridget Griffin back on the 5th of June, talking about their expectations versus reality of their first experiences of teaching. You would have had initial sort of assumptions of what teaching was like. Now, obviously, your training year has been scuppered to an extent by COVID, and we'll come on to that later. But how different were your first experiences of teaching compared to what you had initially expected? If we start with Farhan on that one, please.
My first few weeks, obviously I taught before, but it was a much smaller school. And I think my first few weeks, I just remember thinking that I had so much respect for the teachers because everything that was thrown at them, especially because, it was the first time schools had reopened. So we're going in September. And I was grateful that they took on a trainee as well, because not every school was able to take on a trainee. But it was so intense. It was just so, I just remember thinking, wow, this is intense. It's nonstop. You just dealt with something which is really, really, it took a lot out of you. But they just keep going. Obviously, the coffee helps. But I just remember thinking, wow, this is intense. It was a bit of an eye-opener.
Brilliant, thank you. And just to follow up on that one, has there been any point this year where you've decided, is this really, or you've sort of thought, is this really for me?
No, I think it's always been a case. I've been sort of comparing it with my last role, and I'm a lot happier now. In my last role, there was still a lot of stress involved, targets and everything else. But for some reason, this feels like it means something. Like, you know, if we look at the longer goal, I always say to everyone else that's thinking of teaching, I would think of the bigger picture. Don't just think about every single day. It's preparing you for something bigger. It's making you, you know, just reflect on it. What have you learned, even if it's not gone to plan? So those experiences have helped me sort of think that, no, actually, you know what, I have made the right decision, and I'm going to stick by it. And yeah, I'm glad I made the move.
Brilliant, thank you. And if we're going to go over to Bridget then, how different were your first experiences of teaching compared to what you expected?
I would say very different. I am doing a PGCE, which I know has been slightly different to sort of like the skip programs and different programs like that, in the fact that a lot of us didn't have a first initial placement. So we had a virtual placement for our first one, which sort of consisted of meeting once a week with a partner school online, just talking to one of the teachers. So our first our second placement was started in January, and the first time I taught was online to a group of students.
So when's the first time you actually taught a lesson in a real classroom?
So you'll enjoy this. It was actually at my first job interview, which was 2 weeks into placement. So it was very different, but
wow,
it kind of, you know, threw you in at the deep end. So, you know, very different.
Teacher training, whatever year it is always about throwing you into the deep end. Whether you do a PGC, whether you do a skip, whether you do teach first in particular, I think. But my word, your first face-to-face classroom teaching experience was on your interview day.
Yes.
That is, I mean, just anybody else listening in the studio, you know, that's absolutely mad. And so, you know, I mean, so in a sense then you must be thinking, how can I get more hands-on classroom practical experience? How has that worried you at all going into September?
So initially, yes, but I'm now sort of I've been at my placement school since January, and we finished at the end of June. So it's been very hands-on there. And I think if I hadn't had such a good placement school to be at, then I would be more worried than I am now. But it's been great in terms of they've been very much my classes to just sort of take on as my own. I've got to experience lots of different parts like PSHE, bits of history, different subjects. So I feel a lot more prepared than I thought I would. So I'm not too worried.
Good. No, I think about before I move over to Jasmine. I think about our skip trainees we've had. I did a PGCE, but I work in a school with quite an extensive skip program, and one of our history skip, for example, his first experience of teaching face-to-face, I think, was in the third week in September when he started to take over my 2 Year 7 classes. So we've got massive differences. And I think that's something for employers to think about in particular, and for schools and leadership to think about if you're listening, that not all trainees, especially this year, all years, have had the same experience. Some have had extensive classroom experience, some haven't. Some have had the opportunity to teach GCSE, others might have had minimal experience at GCSE. So, if you're a school leader there, or maybe an ECT coordinator listening in, then just please, bear in mind our tradies have had different experiences. They're all fabulous, but they've had different experiences and their needs will be different. Jasmine, over to you. How different were your first experiences of teaching compared to what you expected?
Well, unlike both previous trainees, I do a PGC and a skit. So I was straight into school in September. All my training has been online, but the biggest thing for me was behaviour management and seeing actually how the students reacted to being in the classroom. I think that was the biggest difference, because I was only able to go off work experience and the like, but seeing how children are being affected by COVID was the biggest difference for me, not anything pertaining to my teaching, funnily enough.
Interesting. Were your expectations of how students would behave in the classroom, were the expectations and the reality at all different?
Yes, so I expected and anticipated students to be, I suppose, quite excited to be back in school and thriving off the routine, but I found it to be the opposite. So in my first placement school, that was an iPad school. So each student was allocated an iPad along with each teacher, which meant that learning was able to continue throughout lockdown too. So they hadn't missed out on anything. For them, the routine was already there, well established. They were able just to return back into school and have not many changes apart from face-to-face teaching. Whereas in my second placement school, quite a working class school, a lot of the students are very, very deprived and don't have access to those kinds of materials at home. And behaviour management has been such a struggle.
Great to hear from Farhad, from Jasmine, and from Bridget again. I'm still absolutely staggered that the first face-to-face teaching experience Bridget Griffin had was on her interview day. She'd had a virtual placement in the first term and then obviously teaching online in the second. And it's great to have Farhad in the studio as well. So thank you. That was number 10. Now at number 9, we get to hear from Carly Waterman, principal of Lodge Park Academy in Corby, about her attempts to embed a reading culture across her school. In this clip, which I selected in the top 10 because Carly was so candid and so open and so honest, Carly talks about the importance of literacy and reading in terms of accessing the whole curriculum, and also introducing Drop Everything and Listen, or DEAL, with the support of her Academy Trust. She joined me on the 17th of April, now more than 4 months ago. Hasn't the time flown? So you said that some students were being removed from the curriculum for reading catch-up. I had a look through some of the policies, and it said that some of the selected students from the bottom 20% across year 7 to 11 would spend half a lesson a week reading aloud to an adult.
Yep.
What lessons are they missing for this?
Well, I have quite a clear view on this, and I know other people would disagree with me, Tom, but to me, it doesn't really matter what they miss because they are not accessing the curriculum anyway if they can't read. So I know that we sometimes get our real knickers in a twist about, oh my goodness, they're missing this and they're missing that, and that's not fair, and let's do it on a carousel so they don't miss the same lesson every week. But frankly, I just think this is too important. So we timetable it around the capacity that we have. We've got a team of people, we've got some fantastic learning support assistants and other sort of teachers and professionals who support us with this. And it might be that they are missing English. It might be that they are missing maths. But actually, if they can make rapid progress in their reading, and then they can access the curriculum far better than if they hadn't had that support. So I'm certainly not the kind of head teacher that agonizes over taking children out of lessons to do this, because like I said, I don't think there's anything that's more important than it. But I've had big debates about it.
No, I'm sure you have. No, it's very fair, and I think the way that you argue it, definitely fair, and definitely something, there's an interesting debate. I remember when I was getting sort of my school experience before I applied for teacher training, and I was sat in somewhere in Whitby in a bottom set year 9 French lesson, and the teacher, who had about 25 years of experience, said to me, "These kids have got reading ages of 6 and 7. They're barely fluent in English. Why should they be fluent in another language if we can't even get the English right?" So certainly the argument that actually we should be taking students out to ensure that they're fluent in decoding, in reading, and that every child is a reader, certainly something I can get behind. Now, a lot of it, well, not a lot of it, but some of this has come from the trust, right? The David Ross Educational Trust. So what role has your multi-academy trust been played in helping you to, not necessarily, because as you say, it's not embedded, but put you on the path to achieving your vision? So tell us about DREC Reads, tell us about LPA Reads, and sort of a role that the trust has played in helping you to get on the path to achieving your vision.
Well, I think one of the things that you'll all know if you follow David Ross Education Trust on Twitter is that reading has always been such a priority for the trust, and they have been really supportive for all of their secondary schools and all of their primary schools in making sure that we're investing in reading from day one. So, we've had huge support in that respect, but there's also a real drive at the moment to make sure that we use money that we get for COVID catch-up in a really strategic and effective way. And that's where DREC Reads comes from, because obviously when you work in a trust, you can pool money across different schools and then actually make a really wise investment. And so we decided as a group of principals that, it would be worth us pooling together the money to buy all of these texts, these really high quality texts that then would be read aloud to students from year 7 through to year 11 in a kind of drop everything and listen approach, so 20 minutes every single day during tutor time. And, you know, I mean, I can't fault the enthusiasm with which everyone in the trust has taken this on board. And actually, it's a really good strategy that has helped all of us to be able to, I guess, kind of jump on board with it. And it sort of reinforces what we've been doing for a long time, because, like I said, we've always had, you know, reading and literacy front and centre. We've been laying the groundwork and we've been building this strategy over a period of time. But then to come in with a flourish now and say, well, actually, we're spending this money in a way which we think is going to absolutely transform children's lives by giving them exposure to these 30 high quality novels over their time with us from year 7 to year 11. I mean, I just think that's absolutely fantastic. And the great thing about working across the trust in that respect also is that you can share resources, share training, share expertise. So because we'll all be swapping the books and sharing the books, then we're going to be building up this massive repertoire of resources and expertise, so that the teachers who are reading aloud these books then have got lots of great resources to draw on and lots of training to draw on. Because of course the teachers reading aren't necessarily English teachers, they could be, they'll be any teachers, because they'll be tutors, and it's quite a big ask, you know, to ask people to read aloud. It has to be done really well, and we want it to be done really well because there's such joy and such pleasure in being read aloud too. And we really want that experience of her, you know, lingering over a moment of drama and or stopping and pausing when it's really emotional and having that sort of collective sense of, oh my goodness, what's happening in this story? You know, we want those moments to be magical for children, and we want them to remember them forever. So, you know, the training and support that's going into this is also like one of the benefits of working across the trust as well, because they're so keen on it.
Carly was an absolutely brilliant guest. It's so rare for me as sort of an early career teacher to be able to speak so openly with a head teacher or a principal of a different school. And the way in which Carly spoke so passionately, and it was very, very exciting how she spoke about reading and building it into the curriculum, and also just immersing children into a whole new world. That was what put Carly in my top 10. Just a reminder, of course, although our summer schedule is coming to an end and we'll be going back to our usual schedule soon, you can join us as a host on Teachers Talk Radio. All you have to do is send us an email at teacherstalkradio@gmail.com. You can fill out our contact form on our website. You can DM us on Twitter at TTRadio2021, and we'll tell you how you can get involved as a show host. You get a 2-show trial, you get technical induction, you have a wonderful support of our host team. So what are you waiting for? We're now going to move on to number 8. Number 8 is the only solo show entrant in my number 10. This was my show from the 8th of May on Hackney News School, which at the time the school had been subject to a very negative news report from a national broadcaster. And what I wanted to do in this show is I wanted to address the issues raised in the report while offering a bit of balance. That's what we're about at Teachers Talk Radio. We're all about offering different perspectives and a variety of views. And I wanted to ensure that the school got a fair hearing. So this was a fascinating show. I had an ITV producer listening live. Members of the school's trust, I was told, were also listening. So listen carefully to what I would say is a masterclass in tentative language and balance, as I talk about what we can learn from how many students or what proportion of students are in detention in schools. The ITV report stated that on one day alone, more than 150 pupils were in detention, approximately half of Hackney New School's population. Interesting. Allegedly, half of the school, approximately half of the school in detention on one day. I've done a little bit of digging. It looks to be, and if somebody from the school is listening and can correct me, please do text or call in. It seems to be 44% of schools rolled in detention on one day. Somebody who claims to be from Hackney New School alleges the following. ITV left out much info on both sides, but great improvements have been made by the current administration alongside a bizarre and ultimately damaging, overly punitive behaviour policy that has left staff and students demoralised and deflated. It goes on to claim students made to stand with arms crossed for 20 plus minutes every morning, being told how disgusting their behaviour is, roughly a third of students in detention every day, and internal exclusions through the roof. They do a lot of good things at Hackney, but it is all overshadowed by the critical, shaming, shouty Victorian behaviour system that forces compliance at all costs. Goes on to claim, and remember, we can't establish this as verifiable fact, but it's a claim, students sent to detention for shuffling feet, not smiling, not folding their arms properly, not chanting the poems enthusiastically enough. What we really wanted at this stage, of course, was somebody from Hackney New School to call into the show and talk about this in a bit more detail, get down into what is fact, what is opinion, what is exaggeration, what is false. But as we stated at the start of the show, although we made contact with Hackney New School via the contact form on their website last Sunday, giving them 4 working days to respond, the school did not respond to this request for comment. It's incumbent on me then, I think, to provide some balance and to say that Hackney New School disputes the version of events put forward by ITV that disciplinary methods are damaging to pupils' mental health, and that the version of events put to me there, which I just said, represents just one version of events. Again, if anybody from the leadership or involved at Hackney New School is listening live right now, or anybody from the school, anybody from the community, wishes to dispute this version of events and provide an alternative or wants to corroborate this version of events, call in right now. You have an opportunity to set the record straight. There is a question, though, and a wider question. I don't want to just focus on this one school. There's a wider question about detentions. My view, and again, if you're listening live, text in, call in, feel free to agree and disagree, to build on this, to challenge this. When sanctions are handed out like confetti, like toffee, they lose their value. If, as is alleged by this person who got into contact with me, we can't be completely certain, roughly 1/3 of the school is in detention every day, the power of the detention as a force to correct, to improve behaviour, loses value. Sobby is in the studio and saying, agreed, just like praise. If you hand out praise, if you hand out positive points, merits, like confetti, they begin to lose their value. If everybody's getting one, then all of a sudden it becomes meaningless, I think. And it's exactly the same with detentions, I think. If everybody's getting detention, if 1/3 of a school are in detention, yes, it could improve their behaviour, but it loses its power, it loses its value. Nevertheless, we have to go back to our Ofsted report from July 2019, the inadequate, damning report, where pupil behaviour and safety was deemed to be at risk. And you can't blame the school, I don't think, for bringing in a strong discipline behaviour policy. You could call it an overcorrection, call it what you like, but they have a behaviour policy and they're sticking to it. All credit to the school on that. One of the worst things a school can do, I think, is to not follow their behaviour policy, to be inconsistent with their behaviour policy. There needs to be a policy in every school that is consistent, insistent, and persistent. That's not my phrase. I'm not quite sure who came up with it, but I heard it once and it stuck with me. It needs to be consistent, insistent, and persistent. And I think this is what this is doing, okay? You could argue if 100 to 150 students are in detention every day for breaking the school's behaviour policy, then the policy is working. Okay, not following the school's policy is definitely worse than having one which is too strict. Megan's texted in and said, is it an adjustment period or over a longer period of time? I would understand why so many students are in detention if it's the initial stages. Surely the numbers will drop off when the students are more familiar with new expectations and realise the consequences are real. That's a question. The new leadership has been in. Now, bear in mind, there's been 2 lockdowns. They've lost nearly a whole year, but they've been in for over 3 terms now, okay? And as far as I can tell, and again, anybody at the school who is listening, please feel free to correct the record. This has been in place since the leadership have come in. The behaviour policy, which is on the website, has been in place since April 2020, so I cannot be completely sure that this has been the exact same policy since September 2019. But you would expect the numbers to drop off when the students are more familiar, once they realise what is wrong and what is right and that things have changed. Kate Jones has shared the show. Thank you very much, Kate. Again, if anybody wants to share the show, there's an icon in the bottom left of your screen, so you can share it with people on your social media. The thing is, and this is where Megan's comment comes in, when allegedly 1/3 of the school's population is in detention regularly, is it working? And as Megan has suggested, and as I would argue, if it was working, the numbers of children in detention would be going down. As behaviour improves, the numbers in detention go down. So maybe it isn't working, but maybe it isn't working yet. Maybe the school just needs more time with students in school regularly without being disrupted by lockdowns. I don't know what their COVID situation is, how many students have had to self-isolate as well. Maybe it just isn't working yet. That show got some of my most positive feedback I've ever had from a Teachers Talk radio show, both from the studio. You had some of our network like Sabia Iqbal, Megan Goods, Kate Jones in there as well, but also from people from outside who were listening back as well. And the general feedback I received was that it was a very even-handed show on what was at the time a very sensitive topic. So I was really proud of the output from that show. It's time now for number 7 on our countdown, top 10 moments, as I reach my 20th show. Number 7 involves one of my colleagues, Kelly Seeley, who at the time of broadcast was a teacher of history alongside me at the same school. Not long after her interview on the 17th of July, Kelly was appointed to the position of Head of Key Stage 5 Humanities and Social Sciences. And so she's going to be overseeing my implementation of our new politics course next year, which I've got to work on a bit. So congratulations to Kelly. Here she is with me talking about what makes a great trainee from a mentor's perspective, as well as how mentors can support trainees with applications, and what happens when the mentor and mentee relationship breaks down. How can mentors support trainees with job applications? Because obviously at the end of their training year, they need to go and get a job. How can a mentor support with that?
Yeah, one of the most important roles when it comes to job applications as a mentor is supporting them with that. So helping them with their cover letters, reading it, editing it, giving feedback on that. Also helping them with the actual application form itself, because sometimes they can be a bit complicated and there's perhaps terminology in there they don't really understand or they don't know what to put. So, you can help them with that very much. If they get an interview, providing them with a list of questions and maybe even having a bit of a mock interview if you've got time. When I was training, I was really lucky that my mentor organised a couple of members of SLT to give me a mock interview. So I was really fully prepared for that, which was really, really helpful. Obviously, writing references is an important one. And also, I think just keeping an eye on jobs, because teaching is a small world. So you may hear of a job coming up before it goes up online, or, just keeping an eye on the grapevine. So you might be able to let them know if there's a job opening, something like that.
Yeah, that's really important, not just in terms of supporting, but also sort of signposting and flagging up things as well. Really, really good. Got a question in from the studio, text in from Stu Green 13. Does the role go beyond just the academic year?
Yeah, it absolutely does. So obviously we've got an ex-trainee at our school who I mentored, who now works for us, and I do find that we still have that really close relationship, not necessarily as like mentor and trainee, but as colleagues. But I know that she feels comfortable coming to me for advice, and I will always be there to support. Other trainees I've had in the past, perhaps I've lost contact with, or, I just don't talk to them anymore for whatever reason that is. Although having said that, I did have a reference request through from a trainee I had about 2 years ago. So I do still have an important role to play, just outside of that one academic year.
Fantastic. So it just shows the shape of those relationships, really, that it just carries on and that you feel like you can support each other. That's really, really good to hear. from a mentor's perspective in particular, this next question, from a mentor's perspective, in terms of making your life a bit easier, what makes a great trainee?
A great trainee, someone that's passionate and enthusiastic about teaching and their subject, and someone who will take on board advice as well and apply that to their lessons. There's nothing more frustrating than giving advice to a trainee and then they just ignore it and do the same thing again and again. You know, and if you have someone that actually goes, you know what, you're right, I'm now going to apply your advice to a lesson, and to see them take that on board, that's what makes a great trainee, because you know that they're listening and they're wanting to improve, they're wanting to get better and become a better teacher. And in that, I think someone who is also very reflective of their own strengths and weaknesses and of their own lessons, where they can come to you and go, you know what, I think that worked well, but that didn't. And you go, actually, yeah, I agree. So let's work on that together. Someone who, yeah, you know, he can work with, who recognizes their own strengths and weaknesses, someone who's really hardworking as well.
Yeah, definitely. And certainly in terms of recognising your own strengths and weaknesses, whenever a trainee's taught one of my lessons, the first thing I do afterwards is I say, well, how do you think that went? And I always say, forget about what went wrong, what went right.
Yeah.
Start with the positives, and then we can work on what we need to work on. So being that reflective practitioner, knowing your strengths and weaknesses, and knowing what you would change, and maybe not knowing exactly how you would change it, but knowing what you would change. I think that's a really, really strong thing for the trainee as well. Couple more questions. If it's just not working out for the trainee, it might be the trainee-mentor relationship is falling down. It might be the trainee's overworked, overburdened. What role should the mentor play in that situation when it's just not working out?
I think first and foremost, it's important to find out what isn't working and why it isn't working. So have a conversation, have a cup of tea, sit down somewhere, chat it out. Because it might be something to do with school, it could be something outside of school, but being there to listen and to hopefully problem solve together is really, really important. If they are feeling overwhelmed, which undoubtedly they will at some point during the training year, because it's a really stressful time, you know, training is difficult, then, you know, as a mentor, there's things that you can do to help that. Take some of the lessons back for a couple of weeks, or you know, do some of the marking. You can prioritize some of their jobs. So, you know, I get them to perhaps write a list of, go, right, what needs doing? Okay, I can take a couple of those, you do a couple of these, and just keep feeding back, setting little mini goals to make it more achievable. If things are really going a bit pear-shaped, then you can perhaps contact the skit and they can get involved, but always from a supportive angle, not from a, you're not doing very well. It's more of a, what can we do to support? Always, you know, it's anything that we can do to help, really.
I had a lovely conversation with Kelly. Yeah, really good. And obviously congratulations to her on her promotion. And I was really, really keen to get her on the show, and I'm really glad that she came on. We're now going to hear from our sponsors, and when we come back, we are going to continue our countdown of my top 10 moments on Teachers Talk Radio with number 6. So see you in 3 minutes' time.
Creative Resources, made for teachers by teachers. At Creative Resources, we've been rethinking what a classroom can be. We've created a huge range of more than 2,500 original and exciting resources that span across more than 15 different subject areas. Whether you're looking for primary or secondary level resources, careers options, PSHE, arts, or humanities, Creative Resources have the resources for you. We offer full curriculum packages and unique, challenging escape rooms themed on topics such as Shakespeare, Tudors, and fractions. We have quizzes, task cards, Tarsia puzzles, and lots more. Better still, more than 100 resources can be accessed for free. Just visit our website, www.cre8tiveresources.com. You can get 10% off any order you make on our website by using the discount code TT Radio. Creative Resources, made for teachers by teachers. Every teacher loves stationery, right? Imagine getting a selection of fun, beautiful and unique stationery items designed and selected especially for teachers, delivered through your door every month. You need to check out teacherslovestationery.club.
I'm always so excited when the box arrives. It's such a treat.
My Teachers Love Stationery Club box is just a little treat to myself every month.
It's always full of delightful and surprising items, including some really good quality stationery brands like Faber-Castell and Stabilo.
And because you never know what you're going to get, it makes it even more fun and special when you get it.
It feels really great to be supporting a family business that's run by real teachers. I can't help feeling like they just know what I'm going to enjoy using stationery-wise better than I do myself.
Visit teacherslovestationery.club and enter the code TTRadio when you buy your first stationery box to save £2 today. teacherslovestationery.club. Introducing the Leadership Masterclass series by Diana Osagi. Learn how to ditch your fears and develop your leadership confidence. How to deal with difficult colleagues. How to thrive when you lead in a challenging environment. And how to get colleagues to buy into your vision. Join Diana for her online leadership masterclasses starting on the 10th of July and running all the way through the summer. These sessions are the perfect way to prepare and refresh for the next academic year and beyond. Book your place at courageousleadership.co.uk/events now. The first 50 leaders to sign up get an additional free mini coaching session with Diana herself. Don't miss this. Courageous Leadership Masterclasses at courageousleadership.co.uk/events.
Welcome back to Teachers Talk Radio. It's just turned 1:42 p.m. and we are counting down my top 10 moments from my Teachers Talk Radio shows to date to mark the occasion of my 20th show on the airwaves. So far, we've had number 10, Farhan Shah, Jasmine Selwood and Bridget Griffin talking about training to teach during COVID. Number 9 was Carly Waterman on embedding a reading culture at Lodge Park Academy. Number 8 was my 1-hour show on the allegations surrounding Hackney New School. And number 7 was my history teaching colleague, Kelly Seeley, on her experiences of mentoring trainees. I see Joe Marici still in the studio. I think you're going to be waiting a little bit longer. We now arrive at number 6. This was a great show for RE teachers. First broadcast on 22nd of May. I had Nikki McGee, Susanna Strong and Adam Smith talking about the Ofsted Research Review into RE. You now have a chance to hear from them talking about how to raise the profile of RE in schools. Nick and Susanna from a secondary perspective and Adam from a primary position. We're going to start with Susanna.
As a head of department, I mentioned before, I see it as my role to have these conversations with the senior leadership team, my head teacher and head of curriculum, about updating. When the core report came out, for example, we had discussions then. I'm going to imminently be scheduling discussions after half term once tags or CAGs are sort of out the way-ish. And we're going to be talking about the points that are being raised in this report. And we've just got to be mindful of that we have quite good access to guidance about what high quality RE curriculum looks like and its role within the school. But as subject leads, we need to be communicating that really clearly to our senior leadership team, bearing in mind that they aren't, that they don't have necessarily all the access or all the time to read all the reports for all the subjects. We need to be helping them with that, and we can expect our senior leadership team to listen, and we can expect them to make curriculum decisions that offer rich, varied and ambitious curriculum and educational experience, and really just making it clear to them that RE is a really fundamental part of that.
Thank you. And also to Nikki, thinking very much about RE as an academic subject, which I think we're all here arguing it should be. The moment where RE was not included within the EBAC, and the moment in which short course, at least RE at GCSE, was not counted in performance tables from 2014, was that the moment when RE departments across the country had a battle on their hands to raise the profile of RE? And if that is the case, and what more can we do, both as yourselves as RE teachers and me as a non-RE teacher, what can we do about that?
Yeah, I do think that the demise of the short course was a watershed in the RE community. It certainly was for me as a head of department when we decided to axe our short course. In terms of what we can do to raise the profile, you need to be an absolute RE obsessive if you are an RE lead, whether that's an RE lead in your school or across a trust like me. Because if nobody else, if you're not going to be the obsessive, who on earth who's going to do it? So I do see myself as, the RE champion. There's someone I'm going to bring the dialogue around to my subject. I also think inviting, particularly in my position, RE is new in my school. We're launching it up from year 7 upwards. It's more established elsewhere in the trust. So inviting people in, teaching with your door open, because often SLT are surprised when they come in. They have a preconception of what RE is for lots of reasons. But if they come into your room and they see high quality teaching that's challenging going on, that is going to do you a massive favour. Your students are also your advocates. Our students, they leave my classroom talking about my subject. When I'm on duty, I'm stopped and they have questions about Muhammad or Plato or Socrates or Jesus. That gets noticed within a school and it will create a buzz. We've also been given the gift during remote learning that lots of parents have had an insight into what happens in an RE classroom. And again, previously, perhaps they didn't know. And so letting people know what you're doing and celebrating it, and also celebrating it beyond the bubble of your school. So, the RE community on Twitter is a really great active place, and senior management from other schools will look at that, and if there isn't great RE in their school, they will want it to be in their school. And I get contacted all the time via email and Twitter about what we're doing and how can I have that at my school. So remembering you're representing your subject, in your school, perhaps across the trust, but also nationally.
Thank you. And yes, certainly another thing which just came into my mind, of course, that Ofsted will be doing so-called deep dives into RE in schools, and that will be for their 2022 report on quality RE based around those so-called deep dives. So that's something which will hopefully help raise the profile among school leaders. Adam, it's slightly different in primary, of course, because RE can often be combined in with, say, geography, history, to create this so-called topic. But certainly RE and other humanities and social sciences do have that overlap. But how do we raise the profile of RE as a distinct subject domain, especially in primary?
Yeah, it's very different. The vast majority of teachers teaching RE in primary schools are going to be non-specialists. So that is a different situation. So you're going to have an RE lead who, as Nikki says, needs to be an advocate for the subject in your school. I think that raising the profile is probably the first step, is to just make sure that all teachers have like a high quality RE curriculum that they can go to that is distinct from the other subjects. I've made no sort of bones about the fact that I think I'm not a huge fan of topic as an idea. I think that geography, history, RE need to be separate, distinct entities on the primary curriculum. And actually, I've said before on another podcast that if that means that you teach a little bit less RE, then that's probably okay, because I think high quality has to come before quantity sometimes. I've found in my own school, I turned up, we were teaching RE in a way that was fine. It was on the curriculum and it was being taught as a distinct subject, but it wasn't really being taught in a particularly academically rigorous way, not through anyone's fault, but just because that's the material that they had to work with. So instead of having, for example, in history and geography, every student had a booklet that they were working through. There was like a class book of RE that contained kind of photos of discussions that they'd had and things like that. So we moved more towards that model of having a booklet and a PowerPoint and a plan that teachers can pick up and run with. And that's been, I think, quite successful, just having those resources there, having that really heavily scaffolded for both students and teachers, having someone in the school who they can come to, and hopefully now someone in the trust or in the local area as well, if people hear that our school has a fairly decent RE curriculum.
That was number 6. Big thank you to Susanna, to Nikki, and to Adam for their thoughts on raising a profile of RE. We had a fantastic show. We couldn't get through everything in an hour and a half. And obviously a big thank you to Waka Ahmedi, who was able to continue the conversation with a new panel a few weeks later. I think RE's profile as a subject needs to be raised, and so many schools don't deliver the time which they need to. So I felt like it was a very, very important conversation we had. It's now time for number 5. And for this, we go back in time even further to my trade union special news hour on the 10th of April. I interviewed Gawain Little and Michelle Codrington-Rogers, Gawain from the NEU and Michelle from the NASUWT. And I interviewed them during their trade union conferences. This show was only meant to be an hour long. It went well beyond an hour, 85 minutes. The part which stood out for me, though, was me asking Gawain about the NEU's position on exclusions, which had caused a big storm on Twitter at the time. Had this been a later show, had this been, say, June or July, I would probably have challenged Gawain a little bit more on some of his points. But it's interesting for me, at least, as the host, to listen back and see how I pushed my line of questioning in those very, very early days and thinking what I might have done differently. It was still a great conversation, and you get a chance to listen again. We're going to move on to an even more controversial subject than exams. Which is going to be exclusions. So my question is, what, if anything, would you like to see change about the role of exclusions in schools? Now, Gawain, I'm just going to say, if I get anything wrong on this, because, you know, I've been looking at the media over the last few days, and it's actually all been very confusing for me. I think Dr. Mary Bowes made a speech yesterday and attempted to clarify a few things. So if I do get if you do think I get anything wrong here, please do feel free to correct. But as part of a wider Motion 21 on protecting Black lives in education, the NEU conference highlighted the concerns of the Runnymede Trust, a race equality think tank, over the rising number of exclusions, particularly involving Black schoolboys. And I've seen a lot of reporting, mainly self-reporting on Twitter, about how sort of the NEU's been influenced by the No More Exclusions group on this, as far as I'm aware. The moratorium which was voted on was proposed by the Runnymede Trust rather than by No More Exclusions, and the NEU didn't propose or vote on any particular affiliation with No More Exclusions. Now, conference voted in favour of, as part of this, campaigning for a fully inclusive, properly funded education service where education is reduced, ultimately ended, and a moratorium on exclusions in the wake of the pandemic as part of that wider motion on protecting Black lives in education. Now, we'll come on to what Dr. Mary Bowes said as well, but exclusions is really buried deep within this motion, right? The wider motion is Black lives in education. So, I mean, you've got experience of trade union conferences. Is this an example of a poor composite, or is it a strong stance against exclusions?
So I think it is a stance around what we need to do on exclusion. I do think it's been misrepresented in the media, but this isn't a composite. It actually came from our Black Educators Conference. So it was put forward by our Black members, and it does call for a reduction for exclusions. As you said, exclusions to be reduced and ultimately ended as part of a fully inclusive, properly funded education service. Now, I actually work with permanently excluded children. That's my current role. I work in alternative provision with children who've been excluded. And it is very, very clear to me, as someone who educates those children, that many of those children who come to us who have been excluded would have been able to have stayed in mainstream education if the proper support was provided. Now, quite often schools aren't able to do that because of a lack of funding. So whilst on the one hand, the government constantly says it wants to improve and develop behaviour in schools, they're cutting all the services that would enable that to take place. So most local authorities no longer have a behaviour support team because they were all made redundant due to government funding cuts. Most schools no longer have behaviour support or inclusion teachers as a dedicated role because the funding for this was cut by government. We're increasingly seeing support staff roles who support many of these students being cut because the funding's been cut by government. So what happens is you take money out of the system so they can't cope with and support students to improve and manage behaviour. And then, of course, there's no recourse but to exclude those students, and they end up excluded when it would not have been necessary. So that's the point about an inclusive and properly funded education service and the need to reduce exclusion. But on the
is it NEU policy now to ultimately end exclusions?
I mean, I would think that everyone would want to ultimately end exclusions, because what we want to do is end the behaviour in our schools that leads to exclusion. You want to support people in order to manage their behaviour and not reach that point. Now, that's not to say, and Mary was very clear on this in her speech yesterday, that's not to say that if there was a serious violent assault, if there was a sexual assault in a school, of course, exclusion has to be the process for dealing with that in a situation where we are at the moment. But surely we'd all like to move to a position where we don't need to exclude students, because what we're doing is investing and improving behaviour in our schools. And as to why it's in this motion around Black Lives in Education, I just think the statistics on exclusion are shocking. If you are a black boy, you are 5 times more likely to be excluded from education than any other student. If you are a Roma student from a Roma family, you are 9 times more likely to be excluded. And this is the one that shocked me most of all. If you're a black boy, special educational needs on free school meals. So if you have that combination of race, special educational needs, and poverty, you are 156 times more likely to be excluded from education. Now, this cannot be right. It cannot be right. Surely we should be supporting all of our students, putting the funding in to have high standards of behaviour in all of our schools, supported properly by behaviour support teams, specialist staff, etc., rather than simply excluding children, passing the problem on. And let's be honest, you know, the number of children who are excluded from education who then end up in prison is absolutely shocking. Surely we should be aiming to change that path.
Do you think that's a correlation, or do you think it's causational correlation then that students who are excluded are more likely to end up in prison? Do you think it's a direct consequence of being excluded, or do you think it's sort of symptomatic of wider factors?
I think it will be a combination of the two. Of course, there'll be a number of linked factors that can lead to exclusion, that can also lead, but the impact of exclusion on a child, I mean, it cannot be underestimated. As I say, I work with children who've been permanently excluded, and when you see the impact that both the behaviour that has taken place, but then the fact that the response to that is exclusion rather than support to change, manage that behaviour, that is often a trigger that then makes things far, far worse in that child's career, in terms of their behaviour, in terms of their, in terms of their ability to get back on track. So, we need to be investing to stop exclusion, not simply to allow poor behaviour in our schools, but to stop it because we're addressing the behaviour rather than just passing it on.
That was Gawain Little from the NEU there talking about his union stance on exclusions, and that was number 5. Really interesting show that had fantastic conversation with Gawain and with Michelle Codrington-Rogers from the NESUWT. I'm still none the wiser as to the NEU's official policy and position on exclusions. There's certainly been very mixed messages. If anybody knows, then please do message in, do text in and tell me. We now move into the top 4. At number 4, it's my most listened to show in my Teachers Talk radio career to date. Music teachers across the country lapped this one up when it was broadcast on the 24th of April. What made it such a great show was that I had 4 guests with different perspectives on the model music curriculum, and I used my position as host to signpost their similarities and differences on certain points. The variety of perspectives made this a classic Saturday afternoon show, which went 15 minutes over, a bit of a theme going on here. And so here's Dr. Liz Stafford, James Manwaring, Dr. Ali Daubney, and Don Gilthorpe talking about the curricular purpose of music. What should the curricular purpose of music be within a school? And this is something which music specialists and non-specialists and SLT have discussed and debated previously, and there's been the changing nature of the role of music in schools as well, especially with the EBAC, which we'll come on to later. So what should the curricular purpose of music be within a school? If I could start with Liz on that one, please.
I'm going to sit on the fence and say it depends. It depends what kind of school you are. It depends what kind of kids you got. It depends what kind of teacher you are. there's a whole sort of bespoke nature of curriculum design that needs to be taken into account. Really, if you're a maintained school, if you're a state school attached to your local authority, then obviously within that mix, part of the purpose of curriculum music is to deliver the national curriculum, but that doesn't apply obviously for an academy or a free school or indeed an independent school. So for me, really, maybe one of the problems with having a model music curriculum, and I know that people have said, oh, that it would be great if we had lots of different models, is that we can't really superimpose that onto a school. It has to be done from the ground up. It has to reflect the school community, their values, their demographic. Otherwise, it's not going to be relevant to each and every child in the school.
James, if I can go over to you now, what should the curricular purpose of music be within a school? You see a lot of things out there in the media of people talk about how music is important because it improves children's mental health and it builds soft skills. Does that frustrate you at all in terms of what the curricular purpose of music should be?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a difficult question in one sense, because I just think we should have music in school because we should have music in school. I think Mark Phillips, the Ofsted HMI, recently on a webinar was on, kind of said, music is music, and what it just should be there. And I guess the purpose of the curriculum should be that music is there to sit alongside all these other subjects. And when students are going through school, if music wasn't there, that they wouldn't be getting the richness of education that they can have. For me, a music curriculum should be part of the wider school offering. And if you think if a school weren't offering music or other performing arts, then they would just be taking an entire avenue of expression and development away from students. But I also think that music does add something really interesting. And I think without a strong curriculum music, so without GCSE A-level or without Key Stage 3 music, you'd then question whether or not you'd have a need or a place for extracurricular music. If you didn't have a curriculum there, you wouldn't have a music teacher necessarily who was providing that. And the extra curriculum side of things with music is just so important and so valuable. And the best way of addressing that is it's one of those, or the best way of putting it is it's one unique area where you can bring students together from different backgrounds, different ages, different cultures, different abilities, all into one extracurricular experience, which I think is amazing. So I guess the purpose behind a music curriculum should be to sit alongside subjects and give students that whole experience that it brings.
Thank you. Interesting. Ali, over to you. The curricular purpose of music in a school.
Okay, so what James was saying there about having it in the classroom is really, really important, actually, because if we don't have it in the classroom leading to the extracurricular and we have it the other way around, then it's a very elitist thing. So music in the curriculum is where everyone gets an opportunity to embody being musical, to have creativity and self-expression. And when you kind of juxtapose that with what the model curriculum says, it says that by the end of year 9, pupils will have gained an oral knowledge of some of the great musical output of human civilization, to have engaged with creative processes through improvisation, end product, and composition, end product, building an understanding of how musical elements work and discuss these with and subjective and interactive models of musical meaning, which on Twitter there's been a fantastic conversation going on with the musicologists who can't even understand what that means, and then developing knowledge of a wider range of notes. What does that mean? Just more than an octave? Can we add in sharps and flats? And their improved fluency in music notation. So to me, actually, by the end of year 9, what the model curriculum is suggesting is not really what I think a music education should be and what it should be there for. So it's about the doing for me.
Don, do you agree with Ali?
I think there's a lot of wisdom in what Liz, James, and Ali have said. I think music, interestingly, is often badged as being something which is all about transferable skills, and it's all about music's great because it improves your results elsewhere. And that may well be the case, but music's also great just for being music because it's part of what makes us human. And all of those things which go alongside the curriculum in terms of pupils choosing to attend co-curricular clubs in music or wherever else are really wonderful things in their own right. I think I think Ali's right about products, and maybe the model music curriculum doesn't talk enough about processes. I think the processes are needed in order to get to the products. I also think it's worth acknowledging that children quite like an end product. And whilst the process is important and the developing of musical understanding over time is clearly what we are doing as part of curriculum music, having end products, whether they be performances or compositions or recordings or reviews of performances they've heard, whatever it might be, children really quite like having an end product as well. And I think the model music curriculum potentially can help us with some of that. But I do think there is some sense where we need to understand the working behind the model music curriculum in terms of the thinking and the pedagogy that goes behind it, because I think maybe that's not clear from the document itself.
It's an absolutely fantastic show at the time. It really took off on all of the Facebook groups as well for music, and even my our school's head of music listened in and told me what she thought. So that was a really, really good conversation, and I wanted to organise another one about the Ofsted research review into music as well, which I know was even more controversial. Haven't got a chance yet. Might be something I do. It depends who wants to come on, and if you want to come on and be a guest on any one of my shows, just DM me at HB_history on Twitter, and we'll work out what we're going to talk about. Let's take a 1 minute break to hear from our sponsors. Don't go anywhere, because after this we are delving into our top 3.
Every teacher loves stationery, right? Imagine getting a selection of fun, beautiful and unique stationery items designed and selected especially for teachers, delivered through your door every month. You need to check out teacherslovestationery.club.
I'm always so excited when the box arrives. It's such a treat.
My Teachers Love Stationery Club box is just a little treat to myself every month.
It's always full of delightful and surprising items, including some really good quality stationery brands like Faber-Castell and Stabilo.
And because you never know what you're going to get, it makes it even more fun and special when you get it.
It feels really great to be supporting a family business that's run by real teachers. I can't help feeling like they just know what I'm going to enjoy using stationery-wise better than I do myself.
Visit teacherslovestationery.club and enter the code TTRadio when you buy your first stationery box to save £2 today. teacherslovestationery.club.
Welcome back to Teachers Talk Radio. It's 2:07 p.m. and we are counting down my top 10 moments from my Teachers Talk Radio shows to date to mark the occasion of my 20th show on the airwaves. So far, we have had number 10, Farhan Shah, Jasmine Selwood and Bridget Griffin talking about training to teach during COVID. Number 9, Carly Waterman on embedding a reading culture at Lodge Park Academy. Number 8, my 1-hour show on the reporting surrounding Hackney New School. Number 7 was my history teaching colleague, Kelly Seeley, on her experiences of mentoring trainees. Number 6 was Nikki McGee, Susanna Strong and Adam Smith talking about the Ofsted research review into RE. Number 5, Gawain Little from the NEU discussing their position on exclusions after their trade union conference. And number 4, my most listened to show to date, Dr. Liz Stafford, James Manwaring, Ali Daubney and Don Guilthorpe's views on the model music curriculum. So we now move into our top 3. Now, in no particular order, our top 3 is Ben Newmark and Sean Webster, MBE, talking about their project on teaching the history of learning disability. Dina Mandel on being a deaf student during online learning and the pandemic, which was my first ever Teachers Talk Radio show. And finally, Joe Marici on being a dyslexic, non-specialist English teacher to a top set and the experiences of being a dyslexic teacher. Now, I'm going to keep a bit of suspense in, so you're simply going to have to deal with that every time I introduce my top 3. So let's begin with number 3, shall we? Who comes in at number 3? So tell us about your petition then. So why did you create this petition in the first place, and what did you sort of expect from it?
So I started the petition because when I heard the news about face masks, I was quite worried about how it would affect me in school. And when I spoke to my friends who also have hearing loss, they were feeling a similar thing. And I just decided to start the petition, either to raise awareness, but also to get the government to do something about it. And I didn't expect it to receive support that it has, but it's great that it has. And yeah, I hope the government does something from it now.
Yeah, at the time of the interview, I think you've reached over 42,000 signatures, which is quite an achievement. So what's mattered more to you in terms of the support? Has it been the support from politicians, from celebrities, from your friends, from people who you know who are deaf? Which support has mattered the most to you?
So I think I've got some comments from people that I've met in the past from either NDCS or people who I met at a school that I went to try it out. Yeah, some people messaged me saying, like, thank you for raising awareness of it, which I thought was quite nice because these were people that I haven't been in contact with in a while. And I think it's things like that. It's made me realise how many people are going to be affected by this in schools. So I think that's the support that's mattered to me most.
So have you been back at school then this week? Then?
Yeah, I was back at school this week.
And how's that first week back been?
It's been okay. It's definitely been different to how it was before the last lockdown, so back in 2020. With the rule of face masks, it's been quite challenging. I'm lucky that my school's been quite supportive and I managed to get hold of a limited supply of clear face masks to give to my teachers, which is good. I know a lot of deaf young people haven't had that, so.
Mm-hmm. So have your teachers been wearing face masks, whether they're clear facial coverings or not clear facial coverings? Have all of your teachers been wearing facial coverings? Because I know that in different schools, certainly in my setting, teachers, so long as we are able to keep 2 metre distance from everybody else, we don't have to wear a facial covering. So has it been the case that all of your teachers have been wearing a facial covering?
Yeah, so all my teachers have been wearing one. If they are 2 metres away, they are allowed to take one off. But if they come any closer than that, they need to put one on, whether they're clear or opaque.
So one of the things which the government said was that teachers needed to be sensitive to the needs of all pupils, and this was something which was mentioned by yourself as sort of missing the point of the petition. And one of the things which you've mentioned is ensuring that teachers have clear face masks. What are some of the other things which you think the government should do to address the issues that you face in the classroom?
So that sensitive comment was the reason why I actually started the petition, because I was angry because it's just not enough that they should say that teachers should be sensitive. A lot of the schools don't have the resources or don't have access to clear masks. And also they need extra funding to be able to support students who are affected by this, so deaf students and also those with SEND. And also the government needs to ensure that they are getting all the resources that they're putting online, and tutoring sessions are accessible for deaf students, so whether that's captioning or BSL.
So moving sort of backwards in time from the face-to-face return, what were your experiences of remote learning like, especially in the last 2 months?
It was difficult to get into the routine of like Zoom lessons, but I got more used to it as the weeks went on, and I actually started to enjoy it, especially with the extra sleep that I was able to get in the mornings. And I spent the time that I would normally spend travelling to and from school, either asleep or catching up on extra work. And my school luckily put the captions on to my video calls, so I was able to get some extra context in lessons if I missed anything.
That's really good to hear. And how did your parents find it? What communications had you had with them about your learning when you were at home, and how were your parents able to support you?
So my parents work as well, so we were all in the house together. But yeah, they've just been also very helpful, making sure that my school are doing what they can to ensure that I can access my lessons, and just encouraging me on the days where I really couldn't be bothered. So yeah, they've been very helpful.
Really good. And so I suppose just to round off the interview then, this interview is going out to teachers, it's going out to head teachers who are going to be really listening intently to what you have to say. So what is the advice that you wish you could give teachers and schools across the country in terms of supporting deaf students, both inside and outside of the classroom?
So if you're a teacher that's supporting a deaf student, I'd say that every deaf student's different. Me personally, I use lip reading and my residual hearing from my hearing aids. And the first thing I'd say is to ask that student what their needs are, because everyone's is going to be different. But the things that might crop up are things like giving the PowerPoint in advance of the lesson so that we could understand the content before listening to it in class, echoing classmates' comments so that we don't miss anything, making sure that all the resources that you use in class, like videos, are subtitled, wearing a radio aid. Some deaf students have radio aids, which is basically a microphone that a teacher wears, and it streams directly to the student's like implant or hearing aid. And any complex language, making sure that they get the spellings of that, because that can be quite difficult. Yeah, like facing the pupil as well. Yeah, the most important thing would be to ask the student what they need.
Thank you. That was Dina Mandelver at number 3, who spoke very openly over Zoom about her experiences as a hearing impaired student doing A-levels during the lockdowns. We had that interview in my first ever Teachers Talk radio show back on the 13th of March. Obviously, schools reopened on the 8th of March, so we were in the context of Dina returning to school that week with face masks in classrooms, basically. Her petition to Gavin Williamson to put clear face masks into schools and to give them to teachers received over 45,000 signatures in total, and led to Prime Minister Boris Johnson announcing on the 17th of May that face masks no longer needed to be worn in classrooms. Dina said that this was a huge relief for many deaf young people across England, so congratulations to Dina on her campaign. We're now moving to number 2 in my top 10 moments. The top 2 were almost inseparable. I changed running order several times when I was compiling this list. So will it be Ben Newmark and Sean Webster on their project Teaching the History of Learning Disability, or will it be Joe Marici on his experiences of being a dyslexic teacher, including teaching English as a non-specialist? Let's find out, shall we? So were the students aware of your non-specialism then, Joe, and how did they react to you teaching them English?
Do you know what? Actually, when I went into the classroom in September, and I know this is a bit of a teacher no-no, I sort of put on this facade, this lie that I was a teacher, that I was an English specialist, or that I could specialize in English. And that was just the first week. And I put on this sort of facade, and I almost reeled off to them this sort of fake CV to tell them how great at English I was, because I didn't want them to see that I was lying and that I did have weaknesses. Because at the time I thought that teachers can't have weaknesses; that's impossible. And mentally, it was quite draining for that week. It was really, really difficult. And that was probably the worst week of my professional career, where I was telling them about how great I was at English. But then the next week I had to read them this passage, it was like a half chapter of a book, and it was year 7 I did this with initially. And I actually told them there and then that I was dyslexic, and that if I do stumble, or if I do get words wrong, there's no need to point and laugh and that kind of thing. And actually, their respect for me went up. And with it being year 7 in the first couple of weeks, I thought, yeah, fair enough, that that's going to happen. But I wanted to test the water, so I did the same thing with year 10, and their respect for me went up massively. And one of my favorite quotes from one of my students in year 10 was, "Why are you a teacher then?" And it almost sparked this topic, this discussion about how dyslexia is challenging. It comes with its barriers. However, I've found ways of managing it, and I didn't actually get diagnosed until I was 22, which means that I had to find these barriers without knowing I had. I had to find these solutions to barriers I didn't even know I had. And I got into this conversation about how, and to be honest, we didn't do a lot in that lesson. However, it made the entire year easier because they knew my weaknesses. And then they felt like they were confident enough to share theirs. And I feel like that was just a breaking point. A breakthrough.
Yeah.
Sorry, dyslexia.
Turning point.
yeah, thank you.
It's all right. It's all right. We talk about turning points a lot in history, so I'm perfectly. Cool. That's fine. So really interesting. Obviously, I knew you were dyslexic, but I didn't know you were diagnosed only at 22. So
it was during my teacher training year. I handed in a essay that they wanted me to. It was like a fake essay. It was just to see what our writing ability was like at MA level. And yeah, they said that there's a problem, and it's either that I'm dyslexic or I'm really lazy. so luckily it was the first one.
Wow. Yeah. So I mean, thinking about that then, when you were at school and teachers didn't know you were dyslexic.
Yeah.
So did they call you lazy, or did they sort of try and accuse you of maybe not putting all of your effort in, or things like that? What were your experiences, especially in those extended writing subjects?
Yeah. I mean, I was definitely given a label because I was in set 5 and 6 at school, and but I actually see that as, a lot of people would say, well, isn't that quite embarrassing? But actually I see it as an achievement. I bought a treadmill the other day, and some bloke knocked on the door, and it turned out to be someone I went to school with, who was in my class, who was in set 6, and he's doing very well. He does I think he's an electrician or something like that. I can't remember. I'm really bad at listening. I'm blaming it on the dyslexia. And he said how well I've done. To go from that to teaching is quite a step. And I was definitely given that label. I don't think a teacher said to my face that I was lazy, but I feel like some may have thought about it, or like professional dialogue with other teachers, just saying, yeah, he's a bit head in the sky, that one, just watch out for him, that kind of thing. But yeah, I was definitely given some sort of label.
Interesting, thank you. So imagine I'm in a staff room right now, and one of my colleagues is dyslexic. What support can I give to them? What are the do's, what are the don'ts?
I love that you've asked this question, because I've started a blog, and this is actually my first blog post, is about, we talk about supporting students with dyslexia, which is great, but we don't talk about supporting staff with dyslexia. And I'm not the only dyslexic member of staff. There's going to be loads that you don't even know about. And one thing that you need to make sure you don't do is, it's the exact same with a student, is you cannot undermine them just because of this. Okay, so when I say processing of information, I don't mean go a word a minute, because it just it would make the member of staff feel really uncomfortable, and actually it would make them feel, I don't like to use this word, but it would make them feel slightly stupid. And that's not the aim, because they're probably brilliant at other fields. But things that you can do is, it's a bit of a teaching trick not to give so much instruction at once. So if you got a class in of bottom set or a class of dyslexic students, and you said to them, right, what I want you to do is, I want you to take your bag off, I want you to put your chair down, get your pen out, get your book out, get your planner out, they've lost it. They have no idea what you've just said. They probably took the first instruction, and then they started to think about that instruction, and because they're thinking about that instruction, they've forgotten about the first instruction.
That makes perfect sense, because the idea of chunking down information, breaking things into small steps, whether that's with classroom instructions, whether that's with tasks, it's something which makes perfect sense to any student, really. And I don't think we need, a teacher needs to single out dyslexic students with that, perhaps, but with every single student, just giving them clear instructions, maybe putting a list of them on the board as well, things like that, rather than relying purely on verbal instructions. And I'm starting now to think about students who I teach, or in my form, who are dyslexic, and thinking about how I can make that easier for them. So now I did really want to ask that question. And what about support for students in your class who are dyslexic? Does it make, because I assume you would have taught some students who are dyslexic, the fact that you're dyslexic as well, does that make it easier for them, or what support would you give in general?
Yeah, massively helpful, because it means that they've got an idea as to how you can combat it, because it means that there is still hope. And I am so glad that I didn't find out about my dyslexia at school, because I'd have given up. I honestly, I would have just thought, oh, what's the point? I'm done. But the fact that I found out after I got a degree, I was sort of like, well, what's the point in giving up now? It's fine. It's manageable, obviously, because I've managed it. But yeah, I mean, the support that I give to them is I will always write in a list. If there's a chunk of instructions, I'll write them in a list. And what that does is it visualizes the instructions. So I just said to you, put your bags down. I can't remember what order I gave them in, but put your bags down, get your planner out, get your this out. And then what they can visually do is tick things off. It's sort of like, done that. And that will work for a few SEN things as well. You know, it might work for autism. Because they like things, they tend to like things mapped out, like they like a plan, and that's almost like a plan.
You would struggle to find a more reflective, candid and honest guest than Joe. I certainly learned loads from his interview on the 12th of June. What made it particularly special, and put it into number 2, was I'd planned to ask him a set of questions about something else, and we went totally off script. We went from teaching a non-specialist subject to being a teacher with dyslexia. We really hit it off during the interview, and Joe was a really, really strong guest. So well done, Joe, for making it to number 2. And so what that means now is it's time for my number 1 moment on Teachers Talk Radio. I'm going to introduce this one to you because it's no longer a surprise. I was delighted to be able to interview Ben Newmark and Sean Webster, MBE, on the 29th of May. Ben insisted beforehand that Sean be referred to with his full title, with his MBE, and I was so pleased that they were both able to come onto the show. We spent a good half an hour before the show sorting out the technology. I had to be on guard in terms of muting people when they weren't speaking, but it was worth it. It was so worth it. So my final moment, number 1, it's Ben Newmark and Sean Webster, MBE, talking about their project on teaching the history of learning disability. Have a listen. Certainly as history teachers, we find ourselves in this interesting position because, as you know, the past is, you know, not infinite but vast, and we have to be selective with material that we choose to include in our lessons and within our wider curriculum. Did you find yourself in a similar position when you were creating this? Did you have any struggles in choosing what to include and what you had to omit?
Yeah, I did, and I think the other thing is that I'm nothing so grand as a historian. I would never describe myself as that. And so what I was also aware of is that you've got a limited amount of time, and this isn't a self-indulgent project. Once you decided that it was actually we decided it was going to be children to learn in school. It couldn't be that long. So of course there were stories that had to be excluded and things that had to be cut out, and I actually went through a long sequence of drafts with this thing as well, and was constantly bouncing it out to many history teachers who I won't mention them because I'm bound to miss out the ones who have helped most if I try and say them all, but many history teachers who are active on Twitter gave me advice with this and helped me try and make sure that I wasn't going down a rabbit hole and becoming self-indulgent. And then of course I sent it to but actually I should say, before I even decided to turn this into a proper book, but when I was just working on it, one of the first people I spoke to about this was Sean, because I wanted to check that what I was doing was honouring the people with learning disability who'd lived in the past and was respectful and would be approved of. And I think it's a good opportunity to bring Sean back in, and he could then pick up for what happened next.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to bring Sean back in. I'm going to unmute him in a second and just say sort of how did you get involved in this project at the start? How did you get into contact with Ben about this? And what were your initial thoughts?
Hello?
Hello, I can hear you.
I felt very proud to be a part of it, because when Ben asked me to join his work about history of people with learning disabilities in his book, because I feel like at the moment not much people know about it, and I feel I wanted to make that happen. Because at the moment when I said what Ben said earlier on and what I said, it was whitewashed. And that needs to be changed, because we could, and no, Ben, because I worked before with a lady called Stabber on a book, about my life experience.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for that, Sean. And my next question then, I suppose, is what were your initial impressions of the project in terms of how accessible it was, and what suggestions did you have to Ben?
Because Ben asked me about the wording, and because I got over 20 years of making information accessible, I could tell me what was not accessible and what was accessible. And Ben listened to me, and I thought, but when I was working with Ben to make sure the book was accessible, I thought he could. Because I wanted to make sure with Ben the book was accessible for people with learning disability and everybody else that just can read it and understand it.
Brilliant, thanks, Sean. And one final question before I go back to Ben. Do you think that having these resources available to you when you were yourself in school would have made any difference at all in terms of how you perceived yourself, both as a child and when entering adulthood? And if so, how?
If I had the book, what me and Ben worked on the history, yes, the book will make a big difference for me. I will understand about the past, about myself a lot better. I'll be more confident about myself, knowing about the history of people with learning disability. Because I think it'd be a big opportunity for all schools to get Ben books in history lessons, because if people with learning disabilities learn, not just people with learning disability, not just kids with learning disability, and kids without learning disabilities learn about history, it will be a big difference. It will change attitudes about people with learning disability overnight.
Thanks for that, Sean. If I can go back to Ben then. When you oh, fantastic! We've got a surprise caller. Let's see who we've got here. I wonder who we've got here. Hello, I believe we have Noreen on the line. Hi, Noreen.
Hi everyone. Hello, Ben. Hi.
Hi, Noreen.
Did you have something you wanted to say, Noreen?
Yes, please. I just wanted to call in to say to Ben, I love what he's doing. The value of what he does is obviously inclusion, but more generally, it's making everybody who has a disability feel like they are just as valuable part of society as anybody else. That I think that is the real value of everything which Ben does, and I'm in so much awe of Ben that, you know, if he was here, I'd hug him.
Ben, anything you want to say to Noreen?
It's always a pleasure to have Noreen, and thank you so much. I mean, the only thing that I would emphasise is that this is really has turned into, I'll talk a bit more about that later, but it's such a collective group endeavour. You know, the reason I think it's caught people's imaginations is because it isn't just me doing it. It's because of people like Sean and others who have been working on the audio podcast as well. But thank you, Noreen.
Yeah, no, I like to say thank you to Sean and actually get Ben to send my thanks to everybody who has helped him. Like he said, it is a team effort. It did need Ben to start it off, but everybody who's joined in, like Sean, have made it what it is, and it's really, really valuable resource, which I'm sure schools in general and pupils in particular will find really useful. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Noreen.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Noreen. Thank you so much to Ben Newmark and Sean Webster MBE for coming on, and of course, Noreen Khalid for calling in. It was such a real privilege to interview them both, and I look forward to following how Ben's project develops in the new school year. just realised I've run 5 minutes over. I've got Nicola who's streaming my show, and I'm sure she'll probably want to get some. But I'm going to go through the top 10 one more time. Number 10 was Farhan Shah, Jasmine Selwood, and Bridget Griffin talking about training to teach during COVID. Number 9 was Carly Waterman on embedding a reading culture at Lodge Park Academy. Number 8 was my 1-hour show on the reporting surrounding Hackney New School. Number 7 was my history teaching colleague, Kelly Seeley, on her experiences of mentoring trainees. Number 6 was Nikki McGee, Susanna Strong, and Adam Smith talking about the Ofsted research review into RE. Number 5 was Gawain Little discussing the NEU's position on exclusions after their conference. Number 4 was Dr. Liz Stafford, James Van Waring, Ali Daubney, and Don Guilfawkes' views on the model music curriculum. Number 3 was Dina Mandel on petitioning Gavin Williamson to introduce clear face masks in schools. Number 2 was Joe Barucci on being a dyslexic teacher, including teaching English as a non-specialist drama teacher. And number 1 was Ben Newmark and Sean Webster, MBE, on their project on teaching the history of learning disability. And that marks the end of my top 10 moments on Teachers Talk Radio on my 20th show on the airwaves. You'll be able to listen back to all 10 of those shows in full should you wish. Just go to ttradio.org/listen back and you can use the search function. We've also had some live tweets go out from each interview on our main account at TT Radio 2021. So go back and retweet your favourites. I'm not here next weekend, which means this is my last show before I return back to work on Tuesday, the 31st of August. I'll be back on Saturday, the 4th of September, when I'll have stopped looking back and started looking forward to another year ahead. I hope you had a chance to listen to Sarah Trickey on her first ever breakfast show this morning. It's been a real pleasure to do 20 shows on Teachers Talk Radio. Here's to the next 20. I'd like to thank a number of people. Tom Rogers and Ella Davies for bringing me on in the first place, first as a newsreader and then as a host. All of the wonderful hosts and support team who have provided that support in my almost 7 months now with Teachers Talk Radio. In particular, in no particular order, a shout out to Amy Ferguson, Christopher Vowes, Nicola Arkinstall, Niall Cole, David Cunningham, Kate James, Sobia Iqbal, Malkrishna Sami, Kyle Graham, Khalil Rouse, Tim Mycock, Tabitha McIntosh, Seb Ventura, Megan Goods, Nathan Ginn, Lucy Newberger, and everyone else who's helped me get to the 20 show mark on Teachers Talk Radio. I couldn't do it without you. I'm sure I missed a fair few people as well. Apologies if I missed you. Tune in, talk it out. See you in a fortnight.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.